The aggregate supply, aggregate demand model is a sort of compromise between the Keynesian and classical views of the economy. Aggregate demand represents the total amount of spending in the economy. Long-run aggregate supply represents the capacity of the economy and is the destination for the economy if it's given enough time to fully adjust to changes in the price level. Short-run aggregate supply represents the path deviations from the efficient level of production will take when prices and wages are sticky. We can use the ASAD model to both diagnose the state of the economy and to identify the effects of a treatment or an intervention we might make to try to heal the economy. Let's take a look. During the Great Depression, and common to most recessions before it, bank runs reduced the money supply, and fear slowed consumer spending and investment spending too. For both of these reasons, total spending in the economy fell, causing aggregate demand to shift to the left. The economy is always where aggregate demand and short-run aggregate supply cross. Long-run aggregate supply is the goal, but it's like a weak magnet. It pulls the economy towards it, but not strongly enough to prevent this deviation. We can see that the price level fell, meaning deflation, and so did real GDP, meaning high unemployment. I know you're probably watching this a little perplexed, maybe a little bored, but this is very exciting. This model for the economy is built on reasonable assumptions about how the macroeconomy works. And for the first time, it is making a prediction which matches the experience of economic recessions. On this bit of evidence, the model checks out. This is where we can use the model to diagnose the economy. Because our equilibrium is to the left of our potential GDP, represented by LRAS, we know that this economy is in a recession. And by virtue of it being at the equilibrium, we know that for the short run, this economy will stay in a recession. If fears grow and spending slows more, it might even turn into a deep recession or depression. The response classical economists would recommend is doing nothing. Deviations from full employment should not last long because wages and input prices will fall to match the drop in spending and bring the economy back to normal. When wages and other input prices fall, it reduces the costs of production, and short-run aggregate supply shifts to the right. It will keep shifting until the economy is brought back to full employment, and there's no more downward pressure on wages. In the end, the economy experiences some deflation, but gets back to normal. But that is what we're waiting for. If we leave the economy to its own devices, we just have to wait for wages and input prices to fall. We have to wait for everyone to accept a pay cut so that businesses can adjust to the deflated price level. Depending on how sticky they are, that could take a while. And as Keynes said, in the long run, we're all dead. His solution was counter-cyclical fiscal policy. The government was large enough that if it had the will to act, increasing government spending and lowering taxes would kick off a chain reaction of consumer and investment spending that would boost aggregate demand, shifting it to the right and re-inflating the economy to its previous levels, allowing for a return to full employment without the pain of further deflation. Pretty snazzy. Of course, if the government is running big deficits to help the economy, but consumer and investor confidence in the economy returns, restoring old spending habits, then aggregate demand might push well beyond potential GDP. Now our economy is experiencing inflation and boosted real GDP. Diagnosis: an economic boom. The equilibrium, which is always where AD and SRAS cross, is off to the right of potential GDP, or LRAS. Some people might not like the inflation, but few are complaining about the economy. It's running on overdrive, with more jobs available than people to take them. But this level of production is unsustainable. The economy is overproducing given the resources and technology it has, burning through those resources too quickly and threatening higher inflation and economic catastrophe. Best to slow it down than to have to deal with the impending economic hangover. The Keynesian solution, rather than letting rapid inflation force a solution to the problem, is to decrease government spending and raise taxes. Either or both will hit the brakes on spending, shifting aggregate demand to the left and bringing the economy back to the manageable, sustainable level of output. Keynes himself proposed a more permanent intervention in the economy, with the government directing the lion's share of investment spending in the economy at all times. But this was not the view that many economists found acceptable, fearing that government would do worse than the market in directing investment. Instead, the neoclassical synthesis recommended demand management via countercyclical fiscal policy. Using budget deficits and surpluses, the government could steady aggregate demand and maintain stable economic growth. Governments around the world were ready to give it a whirl.